Tonight we slip back in time to the flickering glow of oil lamps and beeswax candles, through the crooked streets of Florence, past rows of shuttered windows, and into the quiet hush of a Renaissance bedroom. The wooden shutters creak as you ease them shut behind you. Inside, a four-poster bed waits, not for someone to lie down in it, but to perch. That's right. The wealthy folks of Renaissance Italy often slept sitting up. It's like trying to nap on a long-haul flight with no neck pillow, no seatbelt, and a deeply irrational fear that lying flat might actually kill you. Sounds restful, right? You tread over creaking floorboards, ducking under dried herbs hanging from the beams. The bed's got layers of fabric, embroidered linens, and an almost ridiculous amount of pillows, but they're arranged like a couch, not a mattress. A carved wooden backboard is built high and straight, perfect for lounging with your spine at an uncomfortable right angle. You touch the headboard. It's smooth, waxed, and cold to the fingertips. And no, there's no Netflix or audiobook to ease you in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. A soft breeze presses against the shutters. Outside, the city is unusually quiet, just the echo of a donkey braying 2 streets away, and the occasional metallic clink of a night watchman's bell. Inside, you're offered a goblet of spiced wine and shown to your spot near the bed. Not on the bed, don't be rude. That's reserved for the head of the household. You, my friend, get a carved bench nearby. Or, if you're lucky, a pile of straw wrapped in linen. Your host reclines stiffly, upright, as if expecting to be painted in a very boring fresco. It's hard to imagine now, but in 15th century Italy, posture while sleeping wasn't just a personal choice, it was a performance. Wealthy families hosted house guests the way influencers host collabs, lavish, awkward, and full of subtle flexing. The way you slept said something about your social class, your physical health, even your moral character. And a dignified, seated pose that whispered, "I've read Galen. I fear phlegm build up. I'm basically enlightened." You try mimicking the posture. It's not quite a right angle, but it's close. You're tilted just enough to breathe freely but not enough to risk, well, death? Pneumonia? Acid reflux? No one seems to agree. Beds weren't just for sleep, either. They were practically stages. Family negotiations, business deals, marriage arrangements all often happened with one or more people reclining awkwardly in silk robes, surrounded by servants. The wealthy used beds like modern people use conference rooms. And that stiff, upright sleep. Think of it like dressing for the job you want even while unconscious. The room smells faintly of lavender, but underneath, there's something else: burned tallow and musty wool. You're starting to understand that everything about this space is about controlled appearances. You're not meant to be comfy. You're meant to be seen. That's why beds were often set in the main room of the house. Imagine having your bed next to your dining table. Actually, don't. But they did. In fact, the more prominent the bed's location, the wealthier the family. And the bigger and fancier the bed, the better. Carved canopy, gold embroidery, 6 steps to even get into it. Iconic. Functional. Nope. You notice the servant girl removing a second layer of feather-stuffed cushions. She places a stiff bolster upright behind your host's back and adjusts the curtain rods overhead. She also checks for rats, which is oddly reassuring. Then, out of nowhere, she hands you a wooden tray holding something that looks like dried fruit and stale bread. It's not dessert, it's your calming pre-sleep snack. And if you're thinking, isn't that a choking hazard in this position, you're not wrong. Historians still argue whether this whole upright sleeping posture was primarily health-driven or just another performance of status. Some think it had to do with pre-modern beliefs about blood flow and digestion. Others argue it was because beds were multi-use spaces, and you always had to be ready for a social visit even at 3 a.m. But one thing's for sure, you are not lying flat. That's a posture for corpses. Literally. In Renaissance Italy, lying fully flat was reserved for two things: death and illness. Sleep was considered a vulnerable, quasi-spiritual state. The body at rest was easily confused with the body dead. That's not metaphor, it's medicine. To lie flat was to mimic a corpse, and many people found that unnerving. A nearby chair creaks as an elderly uncle rises to say his evening prayers, muttering Latin through cracked lips. He blesses himself, then wedges two small cushions under his knees and one behind his head. His sleeping posture is closer to a praying mantis than a human being. You watch, utterly still, trying not to make eye contact with the hand-painted cherubs glaring down at you from the ceiling. Suddenly, the shutters rattle again. You hear the distinct clip of hooves outside, followed by a whisper, "Illinois Guardiano." It's the night watchman. He calls out the hour, mezzanotte. Midnight. A few people groan. One starts coughing violently. Someone passes you a wool blanket, scratchy and thick, like the world's worst picnic rug. You wrap it around your legs and finally settle. Your back's starting to ache from the posture, but you don't dare shift too much. Everyone else is still watchful, even in half sleep. And as the candlelight fades, you catch one last glimpse of your host, eyes closed, head tilted just so, as though waiting for a sculptor to immortalize him in marble. His breathing is slow, deliberate, upright, proud, slightly absurd. But hey, at least he's not dead. You blink in the dark, trying to shift your spine against the stiff support of a pillow that feels like it was filled with hay and grudges. Across the room, your host hasn't moved. Upright, noble, and deeply unconscious. The fire has died down to orange coals. You're starting to get the sense that you've entered a different sleep philosophy altogether, one where the bedroom isn't just for snoozing, but for showcasing. In Renaissance Italy, beds weren't beds. They were thrones. Monumental displays of wealth, custom-built to make visitors whisper, "Wow, that's a lot of embroidery." The more ornate the frame, the higher your social status. Some were carved with family crests, biblical scenes, or naked cupids fighting dragons, because subtlety was apparently out of fashion. You can barely see it in the dimness, but the bedposts rise up like miniature towers, the canopy draped in velvet with tassels thick enough to use as weapons. Even the steps to get into the bed are carved. You imagine someone tripping on them and being demoted to the peasant class on the spot. But here's the strange part. Despite how magnificent these beds were, no one seemed to want to actually lie in them. Sure, nobles would eventually rest, but the upright posture remained a key detail. A posture you're now painfully aware of, thanks to the twinge in your lower back and the suspicious cramp forming behind your left knee. Why upright, though? Was it really more comfortable? Hardly. But comfort wasn't the point. Appearance, symbolism, and health theory were everything. Elite sleepers in Italy believed that posture reflected harmony. A balanced body, literally and figuratively, meant you were in tune with the natural order. Sitting up signaled wakeful control, even in sleep. It was civilized. Lying flat, by contrast, was animalistic, even vulgar. You didn't just sleep a certain way, you demonstrated your moral alignment through it. And then there's the hygiene angle. Beds were notoriously tricky to clean, especially with lice and fleas being permanent tenants. You wouldn't want to sink all the way into an infested mattress if you didn't have to. Sitting up gave you a fighting chance at not waking up covered in small, angry bites. Not a guarantee, of course, just a polite form of denial. The linens were washed less often than you'd like to know. A wealthy family might change the outermost layer once a week, but the inner straw ticking? That stayed. For years. You suppress a shudder and pull your blanket tighter, trying not to think about what's crawling near your ankles right now. Historians still argue whether this elevation obsession was more about status or sanitation. Some point to the ornate letto or baldacchino beds, those massive canopy beds with steps and velvet, and say, look, this is clearly theatre. Others argue that the upright position just worked better with how people slept at the time, in segments, with wakeful breaks in the middle. You glance across the room and see someone lighting a small candle. She's reaching for a bowl of dried figs and whispering a prayer before eating. It's not insomnia, it's just intermission. Renaissance sleep wasn't a single 8-hour block. It came in 2 parts, known now as first sleep and second sleep, and this middle phase? It was a social window. You might pray, read, snack, gossip, or, apparently, watch a confused time traveler try to balance on a straw-stuffed pillow without tipping over. You try sitting taller. Your back groans in protest. And it's in this moment, slightly hunched, utterly confused, and surrounded by people with dramatically better posture, that you realize how much your idea of a normal night's sleep has been shaped by IKEA, electric clocks, and mattresses that don't need to be beaten with sticks. Suddenly, your host stirs. He mumbles something in Florentine dialect and reaches for a goblet of diluted wine, sipping without sitting up further. A servant appears, where did she come from, to adjust the curtain around his part of the bed, closing him into a kind of sleeping tent. Privacy was scarce, but symbolic gestures like canopy curtains helped. They kept in heat, warded off bugs, a little, and let you pretend you weren't snoring in front of 3 generations of your family. Because yes, even in noble households, people often shared rooms. You didn't necessarily get your own space, but if you had a bed like this, you were practically royalty. There's another social twist to all this, too. Sitting up while sleeping wasn't just for health or style, it was performative virtue. Think of it like the Renaissance equivalent of that friend who accidentally leaves their Nobel Peace Prize on the kitchen table. Sleeping upright meant you were ready to respond to emergencies, spiritual or physical. Thieves, fires, omens, whatever came, you'd meet it head-on, chin up, spine curved at a medically concerning angle. It wasn't only adults who practiced this either. Children were trained early. You spot a small cot near the hearth, where a child snoozes semi-upright against a bolster, arms folded like a particularly pious Cabbage Patch doll. No teddy bears, just a crucifix and a very thin blanket. And that blanket, probably soaked in lavender vinegar to ward off bad air. Sleep, it turns out, was a fragile state in the Renaissance mindset. Too much of it, or done the wrong way, and you were practically inviting illness, sin, or spirits to waltz in through your open mouth. That's not a joke. People genuinely believed your soul might slip out while you slept. Sleeping upright supposedly made it easier for your spirit to find its way back. Lie too flat, and your soul might wander too far, or worse, get intercepted. You take a nervous glance at the shadows on the wall and wonder if your soul knows the return address. A deep sigh comes from the bed. The room stills again. Another log on the fire pops softly. You settle in, body aching but brain buzzing. Somehow, in all the discomfort, you're beginning to understand. This isn't sleep, it's theater. It's medicine. It's an Instagram story in linen and lace, designed to impress God, dinner guests, and the occasional passing demon. And here you are, playing your part. Sitting tall, sore, sleepy, and slightly suspicious of the pillow beneath you. You drift for a while. Not quite asleep, more like dozing upright in a chapel pew while someone reads a sermon in a language you mostly understand. Then, a sound breaks the stillness. It's not loud, just a soft rustle, like silk brushing against wool. You open one eye. The old man across the room is muttering again. He reaches for a small pouch beneath his bed and presses something to his chest, an amulet, maybe? He looks tense. It's not just age or discomfort. It's something deeper. Fear. That's when you remember what your host mentioned before bed. Lying flat was tempting fate. In Renaissance Italy, death was not an abstract idea, it was a nightly visitor. Not always literal, of course, but always close. And sleeping flat on your back. That was how corpses lay. The dead were laid out that way for wakes, burials, and the terrifyingly regular public processions. Lying flat in bed, especially with hands folded, was basically a rehearsal for your funeral. And no one wanted to rehearse early. So, people avoided it. They kept their bodies propped up, believing that sleep and death shared a dangerous border. Go too deep, lie too still, and you might not come back. And in a time when people died of infections, fevers, bad air, or just poor luck, this fear wasn't theatrical, it was pragmatic. You shift, trying to mimic your host's position, slightly reclined, arms relaxed, head angled, not too far back. It's like trying to sleep on a dentist's chair, except you're also afraid that a demon might slip down your throat if you're not careful. Seriously. That was a real concern. People in the Renaissance believed in nocturnal demons, spirits that preyed on sleepers. Nightmares weren't just dreams gone wrong, they were sometimes thought to be the work of malevolent beings. The Italian incubo, a male demon who pressed on your chest while you slept, was blamed for night terrors, sleep paralysis, and even sudden death in the night. Lying flat made it easier for the incubo to sit on you. Upright sleeping? Less inviting. You pull your blanket closer. Historians still argue whether this fear of lying flat originated more from religious belief or practical medical advice. Some say it's rooted in early Christian imagery, death equated with sleep, and rising from sleep as symbolic of resurrection. Others say it came from physicians of the time, who warned that certain diseases, especially those involving the lungs, were worsened by horizontal positions. Back then, no one had microscopes or germ theory. What they had was theory and observation. If someone with a fever lay down and died faster. Conclusion: lying flat equals bad. No one needed double-blind studies to decide they were going to prop themselves up with 12 pillows and a stick. And it wasn't just superstition. There were practical concerns. Imagine you're suffering from consumption, what we'd call tuberculosis. The fluid in your lungs makes it hard to breathe, especially when lying flat. So, you sit. Maybe that makes it better. Maybe not. But it feels like you're doing something, and in a world without antibiotics, that's as close to control as you're going to get. Your host coughs lightly. Just once. Not enough to alarm anyone, but a woman near the window crosses herself. The line between sleep and death was blurry here. That's why candles were often left burning through the night. Darkness wasn't peaceful, it was a space demons and spirits filled. A room left pitch black invited mischief, disease, and uninvited guests from the beyond. Even dreams were suspect. You glance around the room. Nearly everyone is asleep now, or faking it very convincingly. But their posture remains careful, controlled, upright. Even in dreams, one must look respectable. None of this arms over your head nonsense. In fact, in some parts of Italy, people were buried propped up. Sitting, even. In northern Tuscany, archaeologists discovered grave sites where the dead were positioned almost like they were in conversation, back against the wall, facing forward. Whether that's because of belief systems, practical burial constraints, or just a really dramatic flair for the afterlife, well, historians still debate that one. But it speaks to a broader truth. Sleep, posture, and mortality were all intertwined. You weren't just trying to rest, you were trying to survive the night. Upright sleep wasn't just tradition. It was insurance. You close your eyes and try not to think of the incubo. You try not to think of how still the room is, how close the fire is to going out. You try not to think of the fact that the people lying flat right now are probably very ill or very dead. In one corner, an old woman lies down slowly, wheezing. Two younger women flank her, murmuring prayers. No one seems alarmed, exactly, just solemn. She's allowed to lie flat. She's earned it. That's not comforting. Your own back is aching. You fidget just enough to lift your hips and resettle. Not too far, don't want to spook your own soul into leaving. Your head rests against the wall. The flicker of candlelight makes shadows dance across the beams. One shadow looks suspiciously like a cat. You hope it's a cat. You remember hearing once that cats were considered both holy and suspicious in Renaissance Italy, depending on the region and whether anyone had died recently. Superstition clung to every corner of the night. Doors were locked with protective charms. Garlic was hung not just for flavor, but for fending off evil. Shoes were placed pointing out, not in, lest a spirit follow them in the wrong direction. Tonight, your shoes are under the bench. Wrong way. Too late now. Someone snores, just a little. The kind of snore that says, I am upright, but my soul has dipped one toe into the next realm. It's strangely reassuring. The fear of death by lying flat feels distant now. Still real, but dulled by fatigue. You wonder how many nights it takes before you stop noticing the soreness in your shoulders. You wonder if you'll ever sleep on your stomach again without guilt. But as the coals die, and the shadows lengthen, you begin to accept it. The fear. The posture. The performance of stillness. In this time and place, to sleep is to balance delicately between worlds. And tonight, you're doing your best. The room is still, but your stomach isn't. It growls. Loudly. You glance around. Did anyone hear that? Probably not. Half the people are asleep and the others are pretending not to exist. But just as you contemplate gnawing on your sleeve, someone across the room stirs, as if on cue. A low murmur, a rustle of linen, and suddenly, the room isn't sleeping anymore. It's stretching, yawning, lighting little candles. Midnight, or a little after it. Welcome to the Renaissance intermezzo. Yes, this is perfectly normal. You're now in the brief but oddly productive gap between first sleep and second sleep. And if you're hungry, fantastic. So is everyone else. Someone passes you a plate, figs, olives, a hunk of cheese, and a weirdly soggy crust of bread soaked in warm spiced milk. You blink, confused. Aren't we supposed to be asleep? Nope. Not yet. Renaissance Italians didn't sleep in one big block. Instead, their night was split in two. The first sleep started a couple of hours after sundown and lasted about 4 hours. Then came a break, this time right now. Maybe an hour. Maybe 2. People ate, prayed, journaled, even visited neighbors. And then they'd go back to bed for the second sleep, which took them up until sunrise. Segmented sleep wasn't weird, it was expected. In fact, people thought you were weird if you didn't wake up around midnight. Just snoozing for 8 hours straight would have been considered lazy, or possibly a sign of spiritual imbalance. Sleep like that was reserved for the sick. Or the dead. This middle of the night wake up, it's peak wellness. At least, in a 15th century kind of way. You chew slowly. The cheese is sharp and smells a bit like someone's shoe, but it's oddly comforting. A woman next to you lights a small stick of rosemary and waves it around the food. It's not seasoning, it's purification. The air at night is wet, according to Galenic medicine. Bad air, called miasma, seeps in after dark, through chimneys and floorboards, bringing disease with it. You can't stop the air, but you can fight it with herbs, smoke, and, oddly enough, vinegar. The man across the room is dipping his fingertips in what looks like wine, but smells like salad dressing. He dabs it behind his ears and murmurs a prayer to Saint Lucy, patron of sight. Apparently vinegar wards off eye disease and ghosts. 2 birds, 1 acidic stone. You shift slightly. Your position has loosened during the brief rest, and now your knees are crooked and your neck feels like you tried to nap on a bookshelf. But no one seems to mind. The posture has relaxed. People are chatting softly, exchanging gossip, and in one case, loudly negotiating the sale of a donkey. At 1 a.m. Nighttime wasn't just for dreaming, it was prime time for getting things done. Especially in cities like Florence or Venice, where daily life was crowded and noisy. The night offered a rare kind of stillness. A time when voices could be heard clearly, when thoughts stretched out like lazy cats on warm tiles. Lovers whispered poems. Parents told stories. Scribes jotted down accounts by candlelight. Even priests would get up to pray, some going so far as to ring bells at the hour of matins. Historians still debate whether this nighttime segmentation was driven purely by biology or enforced by culture. Was it just the result of going to bed early because of a lack of artificial light? Or was it tied to something deeper, religion, tradition, even fear? Some argue it was just natural human rhythm. Others say it was a constructed response to anxieties about nightfall and spiritual vulnerability. Probably both. One fringe theory even suggests that people wanted to wake up at night so they wouldn't be caught off guard by spiritual visitations. Demons tend to drop by around midnight, after all. Best to be alert. You stretch your legs and notice the girl across the room is braiding her hair again. She must have undone it during the first sleep. You're starting to see a rhythm here, a deliberate pause in the middle of the night, almost ceremonial. It isn't disruption, it's design. The food helps. Your brain, dulled by half-sleep and creeping dread, feels slightly brighter now. There's something deeply human about this shared nocturnal snack. It's as if the night has cracked open, just wide enough to pass a bit of cheese through. A servant shuffles through with a copper basin, offering warm water for anyone who wants to rinse their hands. You take a turn, and the water is surprisingly nice. Scented faintly with thyme. No soap, of course, but it does the trick. Hygiene is more symbolic than effective in this era anyway. You dry your hands on a cloth that may or may not have doubled as someone's towel, scarf, and dinner napkin. Efficiency. A small fire is rekindled in the hearth, and someone tosses dried orange peels into it. The scent lifts the room. Not quite fresh, but fresher than the sweat and goat blend that dominated earlier. By now, a few people are yawning. One man has resumed his upright perch, eyes closed, fingers steepled like he's auditioning for a role as a sleeping pope. You figure that means it's time for the second sleep to begin. You aren't sure whether to lie back or sit up again. You end up somewhere in the middle, leaning against the wall, knees up, eyes half-lidded. Your stomach is full. Your limbs feel a little more relaxed. The candles are dimmer now, a few of them snuffed out to stretch the wax. Someone sings softly a lullaby in dialect, too quiet to translate, but the melody drapes over the room like a shawl. You close your eyes. No demons yet. No dreams either. Just the distant hum of voices settling, the crack of burning rosemary, and the ache of a spine that's trying very hard to behave. Welcome to the Renaissance night shift. Your eyes flutter open again, not from noise, but from discomfort. The blanket has slipped down, and your neck feels like it's been gently twisted by a mischievous ghost. You reach to adjust the cushion behind your back, only to realize it's not really a cushion. It's more like a half-stuffed sack with the firmness of a reluctant loaf of bread. Renaissance pillows were not the plush clouds you're used to. They were functional at best, medieval torture devices at worst. If you're lucky, you might get a bolster, a long, cylindrical pillow stuffed with straw, feathers, or, on a particularly unfortunate day, old scraps of wool and hay. If you're really unlucky, someone hands you a carved wooden wedge and says, "Sweet dreams." You try to sit up straighter and rearrange the cushion. It doesn't help. See, in Renaissance Italy, pillows were tools, not indulgences. Softness was seen with suspicion, too much comfort made the body weak, the spirit lazy. A good pillow supported posture, prevented corruption of the humors, and occasionally gave you splinters. And it wasn't just the pillows that worked against you. The letto, your classic Renaissance bed, was often made with a rope lattice underneath the mattress. Literally, ropes stretched across the frame, supporting a thin stuffed pad. Over time, the ropes sagged, so someone would have to retighten them with a special key. That's actually where we get the phrase sleep tight. Isn't history fun? And slightly painful? You shift again, trying to find the least offensive angle for your spine. The rope bed beneath your host creaks, as though echoing your silent complaint. Maybe he has a better wedge. Maybe his bones have just given up protesting. Historians still argue whether these stiff setups were meant to support upright sleeping more effectively or were simply the result of material limitations. Some say the incline was intentional, a holdover from ancient Roman lounging habits. Others think it was just the best people could do with rope and straw. Either way, it doesn't feel like a choice, it feels like revenge. There's also the matter of neck support. Renaissance sleepers occasionally used neck braces, yes, like the kind you see in chiropractic nightmares, made of wood or leather. They weren't popular, but they existed. Most people used layered bolsters or triangular wedgies that made sleep feel like a weird picnic on a slope. Imagine trying to doze off while propped against a small ramp designed by someone who hated vertebrae. The girl next to you has a kind of headrest that looks like a mini footstool wrapped in cloth. She rests her neck gently on it, like someone waiting to have their portrait painted and sneeze halfway through. You admire her stillness. And her tolerance for absurdity. You lean against the wall again. The candlelight flickers as the fire dims. You realize you're hyper-aware of your own posture now. Shoulders relaxed, chin neutral, chest open for optimal breathing. It's like Renaissance yoga, except instead of flowing into a downward dog, you're just trying not to dislodge your lumbar region. And if you're wondering why no one simply flops sideways and calls it a night, well, they did. But not until the second sleep. And even then, many would maintain a kind of diagonal grace, like they were napping mid-monologue. You start to drift, but then someone across the room lets out a thump and a very muffled curse. He fell off his wedge. The room collectively sighs. A servant appears with practiced calm, resetting his pillows like a disgruntled stagehand. This happens more than you'd think. Even the mattresses, such as they were, didn't help much. Most were sacks of straw, feathers, or wool. Some had herbs like lavender or thyme mixed in, not for comfort, but to repel bugs and bad humors. They weren't thick. They weren't springy. They were lumpy bags pretending to be furniture. You poke at the bundle beneath your knees. It smells vaguely of cloves and something else. Possibly centuries of ambition. Still, there's something kind of cozy about the ritual. The stiffness. The weird specificity of each person's setup. Everyone here has their way of sleeping, angled, upright, slightly curled, folded like laundry, or perched like they're trying to audition for sainthood. It's communal yet private. Everyone asleep in the same room, in the same air, yet wrapped in their own miniature world of bolsters and blankets. It's a shared solitude, padded with itchy wool and very stern ideas about posture. A soft noise breaks the moment. Someone is adjusting a bed rope, squeak twist creak. You watch them use a long-handled key to tighten the lines beneath the mattress. The ropes flex and snap into tension. There, the woman mutters. Tighter now. She pats the bed like it's a dog she's just scolded. That's another thing. Beds weren't always private. Married couples shared beds with relatives, guests, and sometimes even servants. It wasn't considered strange, it was practical. You shared heat, space, and company. Personal space hadn't been invented yet. But the design of the bed still mattered. Upright sleep demanded structural help. Beds with high backs, sloped bolsters, and carefully stacked pillows allowed you to maintain that blessed 45-degree angle. Enough to keep the humors balanced. Not enough to tempt death. You close your eyes and try again. Shoulders aligned. Knees soft. Neck uncooperative. A nearby woman mutters in her sleep. Something about figures. Maybe her dreams are more comfortable than her reality. Someone else sneezes and mutters, "I told you we needed more rosemary." You smile, just a little. Because despite the discomfort, the stiff props, and the absolutely absurd geometry of Renaissance sleep, there's something strangely reassuring about the effort. These people weren't sleeping just to rest. They were sleeping to survive, to signal, to control what little they could. And for them, posture was power. It's not so different from your world, really. Today, you've got ergonomic mattresses, memory foam pillows, and apps that track your sleep cycles like a nosy cousin. But the goal's the same: find peace in a restless world. Even if that peace comes with a wooden wedge under your neck and a roommate who snores in Latin. You're somewhere between sleep and soup when the smell hits you warm, garlicky, and oddly meaty. A door creaks. Footsteps shuffle. Plates clink. And just like that, the room stirs again. Wait. Is that stew? Yes. Yes, it is. Your host yawns and, still sitting upright, accepts a small bowl of something steaming and dark. You're confused, slightly alarmed, and absolutely ready to eat again. Welcome to the Midnight Snack Renaissance Edition. This isn't a rare occasion. In fact, in Italy during the 14th to 16th centuries, breaking up your sleep with a little something to eat wasn't just normal, it was expected. Second supper, collation, or just the midnight bite was a routine part of the night. Especially in wealthier homes, food and rest worked in tandem, like reluctant dance partners with digestive issues. Your bowl arrives. It's a thick broth with lentils, maybe some rabbit, definitely a lot of garlic, and possibly something that once flew. It's warm and strangely comforting. The flavor is simple, salty, rustic. Like someone boiled a cookbook and added bread. But why eat now? Why wake up halfway through the night just to chew? Well, according to the medical logic of the time, digestion was a delicate, moody process that required constant supervision. Eating late wasn't a sin, it was a strategy. Doctors believed that a small meal in the middle of the night restarted the internal fires of digestion and balanced the body's four humors. Especially if you were cold or tired or had a touch of melancholy, which, frankly, covered most people after midnight. Humorism dominated Renaissance medicine: 4 bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, that needed to stay in perfect harmony. If they got out of whack, hello headaches, boils, or worse, melancholia, which they treated like both a medical condition and an unfortunate personality flaw. Midnight soup. A preventative measure. Food was medicine. Comfort food was practically a prescription. Historians still argue whether this midnight meal was more rooted in social custom or medical belief. Did people genuinely think it improved their health? Or was it just an excuse to nibble and gossip in the dark without the pressure of daytime etiquette? Probably both. After all, nothing says ancient wellness like eating stew while half asleep in a corset. A man by the fire dips bread into oil and shares it with a younger cousin. They whisper about grain prices and the neighbor who borrowed a donkey and never gave it back. It's like a sleepy family dinner, happening at 2:15 a.m. Everyone's wrapped in blankets, half-conscious, and deeply invested in the plot of some local drama involving chickens. You sip your broth. It's surprisingly filling. And weirdly, you're less sleepy now than you were before. Maybe they were onto something. This middle-of-the-night moment isn't just for eating. It's for living. Quietly, softly, with low voices and shared bowls. There's something tender about it. Something profoundly human. Even if your back still feels like it's been personally cursed by a vengeful chiropractor. You notice a servant quietly rotating the herbs in a pot near the fire, lavender, marjoram, and a bit of mint. The smell shifts the room. Not just because it's pleasant, but because it's practical. Good smells ward off bad air, and bad air causes everything. Or so they thought. You try to imagine explaining germs to someone here. Microscopic invaders? Invisible bacteria? They'd probably nod politely, then shove more rosemary in your mouth just to be safe. As you scrape the bottom of your bowl, you spot something peculiar, a small dish of candied fennel seeds and aniseed near the bed. Digestives. Or breath fresheners. Or both. People weren't just focused on surviving the night, they were deeply invested in doing it with dignity. And yes, you're still sitting up. No one eats lying down. That would confuse the digestive system, anger the spleen, and possibly result in death by gas. You think that's a joke, but it's not. Death by gas was a real fear. Not the kind you're thinking, more like internal imbalance, indigestion gone rogue, a slow bubbling of bile that results in your soul making a very ungraceful exit. You glance around. Most people have finished eating. Some are brushing crumbs from their lap, others mumbling prayers. A few are already nodding off, heads tilted like flowers giving up on daylight. You notice the fire has been stoked again, small logs arranged in a pattern meant to burn slow and long. That warmth is crucial. The Renaissance night was filled with cold drafts, and cold air was believed to carry disease. The idea of catching your death wasn't metaphorical, it was immediate. Sudden chills, especially while the body was digesting, were seen as almost criminally reckless. Someone wraps a wool scarf around their neck. Another adds a hat. And the child in the cot, swaddled like a burrito. No part of the body left exposed to the cold. Except maybe noses, which were considered brave. You ease yourself back into your semi-upright position, resisting the urge to lie flat and let gravity take over. But you're full now. Your belly is warm. Your body has accepted the nonsense of this routine, if only out of exhaustion. There's a lull again. Quiet murmurs drift off. One last whisper about someone seeing a ghost outside the window. It was a donkey, probably. A shared laugh. A yawn. And then silence. You watch as the final candle is snuffed. The room descends into gentle darkness. You're tired. Your head rests on your awkward bundle of bolsters, your hands folded in the world's least natural way, and somehow, despite the cramps and the cabbage-scented air, you begin to understand. This isn't just weird old sleep. It's ritual. A rhythm of eating, resting, watching the fire, warding off demons, and rearranging your hips every 10 minutes because your ancestors apparently hated lying flat. And tonight, you're one of them. A distant bell tolls. 3 chimes, slow, deliberate. You stir again, unsure whether minutes or hours have passed. The room has changed. The fire's down to soft red embers now, barely glowing. Most of the bodies around you are still, draped in blankets, heads leaning slightly, as if frozen in mid-thought. The second sleep has begun. You wiggle your toes beneath the scratchy wool blanket. The warmth is patchy, but your body feels heavier now, more settled into the odd rhythm of Renaissance rest. You've stopped resisting the posture. Sitting up to sleep no longer feels like a punishment, it feels like a compromise. Outside the shuttered windows, the wind has picked up. It whistles through narrow alleys and sways the wooden beams overhead. You imagine Florence, or perhaps Venice, still wrapped in moonlight, courtyards sleeping, cats prowling rooftops, and somewhere, a baker already preparing dough for morning bread. Inside, it's perfectly still, until someone mutters in their sleep, "San Sebastiano, protect me." A small prayer, tossed like a stone into a well. You wonder who else is praying right now, in this quiet, draped world of shadow and linen. That's the thing about this era. Sleep wasn't just about bodily rest, it was spiritual warfare. Each night, you stepped onto a battlefield of unseen forces. The position of your body, the prayers you murmured, even the direction your bed faced could tilt the odds. And not just any direction. Beds, especially among the devout, were often positioned facing east. Toward Jerusalem. Toward resurrection. You weren't just sleeping, you were rehearsing for the end of time. Your host, now fully reclined, but still not flat, because that would be a sin against both medicine and God, breathes deeply. His sleep is serious business. The kind of sleep that could summon visions or warnings, depending on what you ate before bed or how guilty your conscience was. Which brings us to dreams. Oh, dreams. You've had a few already tonight, or maybe you're still in one. But for the people of Renaissance Italy, dreams were more than brain static. They were omens, messages, sometimes even diagnoses. You shift in place again, blanket rustling softly, as if to signal to the dream spirits that you're available for communication. Maybe they'll bring you something subtle, a goat with your aunt's voice, or a floating fig that recites poetry. Or maybe something darker. You did, after all, forget to cross yourself properly before dozing off. Renaissance dream interpretation was half science, half superstition, and entirely serious. Scholars read dreams like physicians read urine, with great attention, a dash of flair, and lots of guesswork. You might be dreaming about falling, not because you miss your childhood, but because bile is up and blood is down. Or you dream of fire. Congratulations, you've got inflammation. Possibly demonic. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation in this period leaned more on ancient classical texts like Artemidorus's Oneirocritica or more on Christian doctrine. Either way, dreams were analyzed like weather patterns, closely, nervously, and with a high chance of misinterpretation. And if your dream seemed too real, too pointed, well, then it might not be a dream at all. You notice now that your host wears a thin cord around his wrist, tied with 3 knots. You've seen this before, Benedizione del Sonno, a sleep blessing, often knotted by a priest or midwife. It's meant to keep bad dreams, evil thoughts, and nighttime visitors at bay. Think of it as a holy Fitbit for the soul. Next to you, a woman snores softly, clutching a small pouch of herbs. Likely lavender, but could also be rue, or even dried sage wrapped in silk. These were tucked into pillows or placed under the tongue to calm the mind and protect the spirit. If dreams did visit, people hoped they'd be the useful kind, a vision, a solution, or maybe just a nice moment with a deceased loved one. You're not so lucky. Your first flicker of dream is just you, endlessly walking in too tight shoes, being chased by a goose with excellent aim. You startle awake, heart racing. No one else moves. Even the goose has retreated. You sit still for a moment, listening. Nothing. Just the low, irregular sounds of shared sleep, sighs, rustles, and one extremely loud wheeze from the uncle in the corner. You marvel at how communal it all is. Everyone here, breathing together, dreaming together, enduring this odd, upright slumber with dignity and garlic-scented grace. The fire lets off a soft pop. Your shoulders slump a little. You let yourself sink just a touch more against the stacked bolsters behind you. Not too far. Just enough. It's easy to romanticize this life, wrapped in candlelight and mystery. But it's also hard. Physically hard. Spiritually exhausting. Sleep wasn't a break, it was another chore, another battlefield, another performance. And even dreams were suspect. You remember what you were told before bed. If you dream of teeth falling out, prepare for bad news. If you dream of water, check your humors. If you dream of flying, congratulations, you're either blessed or dangerously imbalanced. You hope for none of the above. And yet, there's beauty in this shared vulnerability, in the careful balance of posture, prayer, and pillow arrangements, in the stillness that wraps this room like a second blanket. You let yourself drift again. The second sleep begins in earnest now, a slow descent into safer dreams. The kind with no messages, no ghosts, no geese. Just shadows behind your eyes and the whisper of someone reciting a prayer in their sleep. You might not be comfortable. Your legs might be numb. But for the first time tonight, you're not fighting it. And that, in this upright, garlic-scented, linen-draped world, that's as close to peace as it gets. A soft knock wakes you. Not at the door. At your soul, maybe. Or at your patience. It's still dark. The kind of dark that feels like velvet pressed over your eyes. A few coals in the hearth pulse like sleepy hearts, casting the faintest red glow across the room. Someone nearby shifts, mutters something about a dream where a pig turned into a bishop, then sighs contentedly and sinks back into their half-upright perch. You're not fully awake. Not fully asleep either. Your body aches, your brain is foggy, and your knees are arguing with your hips about whose turn it is to be uncomfortable. Welcome to the delicate tail end of second sleep, that strange, suspended time just before dawn. And that's when it happens. The sounds of the outside world start to return. A rooster crows. Somewhere down the alley, a cart creaks. From a nearby room, a dog barks once and gives up. The city isn't awake yet, not fully, but it's stretching. And so is your host. He adjusts his blanket, scratches his beard, and pulls a small book from beneath his bolster. You expect something poetic, but no, it's a devotional. A tightly bound book of prayers, worn and patched and clearly well loved. Reading upon waking wasn't unusual. In fact, it was encouraged. One must center the soul before sunrise, after all. The boundary between sleep and waking wasn't sharply drawn in this era. Waking up was a process. And during that liminal moment, when you were neither here nor there, the spirit was thought to be open, vulnerable, or, depending on your temperament, extra receptive to divine messages or demonic whispers. Which is why the first words out of your mouth in the morning mattered. Buongiorno was nice, sure. But better to start with a prayer. A psalm. A quiet nod to the heavens. Your host mutters something in Latin, possibly Psalm 91, and then kisses his thumb and presses it to his forehead. You consider doing the same, but instead just rub the kink out of your neck and mumble something unintelligible that probably includes the word "oh." There's movement now. A servant girl passes through the room with a small lantern, checking for coals, blankets, and apparently signs of life. She adjusts someone's pillow, tosses a sprig of rosemary into the fire, and exits as silently as she came. You sit quietly, observing, breathing, becoming awake in stages. This wasn't just a household quirk. In Renaissance Italy, mornings were ritualized. There were proper steps to waking, and they weren't optional if you were respectable or superstitious. First, you thanked God for sparing your life in the night. Because let's be real, statistically, there was always a chance you wouldn't wake up. Between disease, sudden illness, and the odd visit from a vengeful spirit, making it to morning was never taken for granted. Next came physical care. Rinsing your face with rosewater or vinegar. Brushing your teeth with twigs dipped in salt or powdered herbs. Not brushing them because they sparkled, no, you did it because breath, like sleep posture, was a reflection of the soul. If your mouth smelled like death, what did that say about your spirit? You glance around and see a man, still wrapped in his blanket, spitting discreetly into a small copper basin. He swishes something in his mouth that smells faintly of mint and myrrh, then wipes his lips with the same linen he slept on. Efficient. Then there was the inspection. Before anyone got dressed for the day, there was a brief but careful review of how you looked. Not in a vain way, well, okay, a little, but mostly to make sure your appearance didn't suggest illness. Pale? That could be bad humors. Splotchy cheeks might mean you're about to spread something. And drooping eyelids could indicate late-night sin, or at the very least, insufficient rosemary exposure. Historians still debate whether these morning rituals were born more from piety or practicality. Were people truly afraid of spiritual corruption, or just trying to keep lice and rumors at bay? The answer, as always in the Renaissance, is both. And if you were a woman, multiply the complexity of your morning routine by 10. Hair had to be brushed, often with a boar bristle brush soaked in perfumed oil. Skin needed to be moistened, but not too much. Rouge was frowned upon unless it was naturally achieved, which meant eating certain herbs or lying with your head slightly downward to encourage blood to pool attractively in the cheeks. Some ladies slept with slices of lemon on their elbows to whiten them. Others wore linen masks soaked in milk. One especially determined woman in Naples reportedly slept with a live toad on her stomach to attract beauty energy, which sounds fake but feels true. You, however, just sit there wondering whether you've lost circulation in your entire left leg. You try to shift positions. Something cracks, possibly you. Someone nearby starts to hum. A soft tune, half lullaby, half prayer. It wraps around the room like steam. Not everyone is up, but the day has begun to whisper itself into existence. You glance toward the window. A faint line of blue is creeping across the sky, brushing the silhouette of the rooftops. Somewhere, church bells begin to toll again, louder now. Matins has passed. Lauds begins. People begin to rise. Not in a rush. Not suddenly. It's more like watching flowers open after rain. Stretching limbs. Soft yawns. A sniff here, a foot rub there. You spot someone doing a very slow twist at the waist, possibly praying or simply testing whether their spine has returned from purgatory. You're tempted to lie down fully now, just for a second. But instinct, or possibly centuries of generational guilt, keeps you upright. You instead settle into a practiced lean, somewhere between alert monk and tired tree. There's comfort in the predictability of it all. The communal waking, the slow layering of habit and ritual. You may be sore, slightly hungry, and unsure how much of last night was a dream, but you've made it. You slept sitting up. You're still here. And morning is almost fully upon you. The sun finally breaks the horizon. It creeps in gently at first, brushing the wooden shutters with gold and pushing faint fingers of light across the floor. Dust dances in its path, tiny specks floating like sleep still lingering in the air. One beam lands directly on your knees, and suddenly, you're a cat basking in warmth after a long night of calculated discomfort. You've survived the Renaissance night. Not triumphantly, not comfortably, but you're intact. And apparently, that's the goal. Because in this world, waking up alive, soul still intact, joints still mostly functioning, was cause for quiet celebration. Not a party, exactly, but a silent moment of gratitude between one breath and the next. Around you, the waking has become routine. No one gasps or groans or exclaims. They rise with the slowness of plants, unfolding layer by layer, performing the morning like it's a prayer. And in some ways, it is. Clothing is adjusted. Bedheads are patted down. Belts are tied, not too tightly. People step into the daylight not as individuals but as roles: mother, merchant, servant, son. The person who slept in a heap beside you is now someone's boss. Someone's priest. Possibly someone's barber. And you're something else too now. You're no longer a baffled guest, trying to survive the rigid geometry of upright sleep. You're someone who understands the logic, however strange, of this strange little world. Someone who knows that to lie flat is to invite illness, to sleep too deeply is to court death, and that between two chunks of sleep, there is soup. You swing your legs out from under the blanket and let your feet touch the cold floor. It's a jolt, but a helpful one. Your body is heavy, but not broken. Your back protests like it's been arguing with gravity all night, and technically, it has. But it's a dull ache now. Familiar. Your host offers you a nod. Dormito Bean. He asks, did you sleep well? You consider your answer. Technically, no. Realistically? Surprisingly, yes. You nod. Breakfast begins in the same space where the sleep happened. There's no dining room shuffle. The bedchamber is the living room, is the place where someone will argue about taxes in about 15 minutes. A boy brings in a tray with watered wine, more stale bread, you're starting to think bread never actually goes fresh here, and a soft cheese that tastes like regret but spreads nicely. This is the breakfast of the Renaissance. Simple, efficient, meant to get you vertical and moving. No bacon, no eggs, no flapjacks. Just things to keep the stomach settled and the bile unbubbled. A woman takes a small piece of dried fig and offers it to her child with a quiet grazy addio. The child munches without enthusiasm. It's too early for enthusiasm. You sip the wine. It's weak. Almost just grape-scented water. And yet, it feels like an accomplishment. You've made it to morning without choking on your own breath, without being trampled by demons, and without falling off your precarious sleep perch and breaking a hip. There's a strange pride in that. Historians still argue whether these early morning rituals were more functional or spiritual. Was breakfast just about energy, or was it symbolic? Was eating in silence a gesture of devotion, or just a way to avoid accidentally insulting your cranky neighbor before he's had his cheese? Like most things in Renaissance Italy, the answer is layered. Food, sleep, and spiritual well-being were tangled like the sheets you barely disturbed. Someone opens the shutters, and the sunlight floods in, stronger now, almost arrogant. The chill starts to fade, and you hear the first real sounds of the street, hooves on cobblestone, a merchant shouting about olives, the metallic clang of someone who definitely should have waited until mid-morning to start blacksmithing. You stretch your arms overhead. It feels risky, rebellious. Your back pops in protest, and the woman next to you offers a sympathetic smile. You're part of the group now, the secret society of the upright sleepers. And it is a society. One dictated by beliefs, reinforced by rituals, held up, literally, by stiff pillows and superstition. You start to wonder how many people in this room actually believe in the dangers of lying flat, and how many are just following the posture because it's how things have always been done. After all, isn't that half of tradition? One man lingers in the corner, still reclined. Eyes closed, breath shallow. No one disturbs him. You glance again and realize, he didn't make it. Someone gently drapes a cloth over his face. The rest of the room carries on. Not in disrespect. In reverence. In rhythm. Because death is never far here. Not at night. Not in the morning. It isn't loud or dramatic, it's just one more motion, folded into the day's beginning like a final sigh. You finish your bread and rub your hands together for warmth. The fire's been banked, the ashes swept. The night is over. And the sun, finally bold enough to own the sky, spills across the room like a silent promise. Of life. Of another day. Of more awkward sleeping positions to come. Your host stands fully now, arms stretched wide, bones cracking in gentle chorus. He picks up the wedge of wood he used as a pillow and places it back on a shelf like it's a sacred object. Which, for him, it probably is. You think about how many generations have done this. How many nights passed like this, one half sleep followed by another, wrapped in fear and devotion and absolutely unreasonable lumbar angles. How many people survived the night because they believed they would? And maybe that belief was enough. You breathe deeply. For the first time in hours, you feel light. You survived the Renaissance night. The door creaks open. It's not dramatic, just a soft wooden sigh that lets in a wedge of brighter light and a breeze that smells faintly of horses, smoke, and someone making soup 3 buildings away. You blink into it, letting your eyes adjust to this new color of day. Gone are the velvet shadows of night. Morning in Renaissance Italy arrives like a painting being gently unrolled. Ochre rooftops, stone courtyards, laundry lines, and the echo of bells bouncing off narrow walls. People begin to move out of the sleeping chamber. Not all at once, but in polite trickles. Some head toward the washroom. If you're rich, that means a stone room with a basin and a jug of cool water. If you're not, it means the courtyard trough, probably already being used by 3 other people and a chicken. Either way, there's splashing and the obligatory shiver. You're not in a rush. Your limbs are still negotiating with gravity after their all-night act of defiance. Sitting upright for hours sounds simple in theory, but your body feels like it just performed a monologue in an Elizabethan tragedy, and every joint is auditioning for a sequel. You spot your host again. He's already dressed, tunic belted, sleeves rolled, hair finger-combed. He's not exactly fresh, but he carries that air of practiced readiness, like a man who's used to performing productivity before breakfast. Beside him, his wife is fixing her headscarf with one hand and stirring something with the other. She gives you a nod, less good morning, more congrats, you lived. You smile back and begin the slow task of rejoining the world. But your mind lingers. On the sleep. On why they did it this way. On how it worked, despite all logic, every night. See, you might assume upright sleep was a medical fad. Something strange and short-lived. But it wasn't. This posture persisted for centuries. It was woven into the expectations of doctors, priests, midwives, even poets. It wasn't seen as weird, it was wise. And not just in Italy. Similar practices stretched across medieval and Renaissance Europe. But Italians they did it with flair. Where the English slept upright in drafty cottages, Italians had carved wooden headboards, embroidered bolsters, and perfectly arranged prayer relics dangling from wall hooks just above the sleeping spot. Everything had its place, and every place had its superstition. One particularly fancy noble in Milan reportedly slept in a chair surrounded by 4 standing candles, each one representing a different saint. If the flame flickered in the night, he would wake, check his pulse, and say a prayer before continuing his very glamorous version of insomnia. And get this, some people didn't sleep at home at all. Travelers, traders, diplomats, they often dozed upright in roadside taverns, on hard benches, or inside cramped wagons. There are even accounts of scholars catching short naps propped against their desks between long hours of copying manuscripts. Upright sleep wasn't just tolerated, it was normalized, even portable. Historians still argue whether this posture was rooted more in religious practice or medical precaution. Was it about fearing death or managing digestion? Was it a holdover from Roman reclinatio or simply a smart response to beds that weren't designed for comfort? The truth, frustratingly, seems to be yes to all. And the more you think about it, the more it makes a strange kind of sense. Lie flat, and you're vulnerable. Your soul might wander. Your breath could stagnate. You could, according to the medical texts of the time, drown in your own phlegm. Sleep upright, though, and your humors stay balanced. Your chest stays open. Your soul stays where it belongs. Even the church, ever vigilant about physical posture, saw uprightness as an echo of divine order. Sleeping like a corpse might be a rehearsal for death, but sleeping like a saint, that was a performance of faith. You think back to the moment before you nodded off last night. That odd stillness. That careful arrangement of limbs and bolsters. It wasn't just about avoiding death, it was about control. A way to make peace with the chaos of the world by micromanaging how you rested inside it. And really, who doesn't crave that kind of control? You stretch your arms again. Your shoulder makes a sound like a medieval door hinge. A servant notices and hands you a mug of hot water with lemon and rosemary in it. You sip. It tastes like floor cleaner and hope. Outside the sleeping room, the household is in motion. Bread is being kneaded. Chickens are being harassed. Children are arguing about who stole the good comb. It's ordinary. Gloriously so. You begin to tidy your little corner of the bedchamber, arranging your blanket, smoothing your linen pillowcase, placing your makeshift neck wedge back where you found it. No one told you to. But it feels right. There's an unspoken rule here. You leave the sleep space the way you entered it, with reverence. Not because the bed is sacred, but because the act of surviving the night is. Especially when it's done sitting upright, surrounded by the invisible threats of air, illness, and theology. A young man stops beside you. "You'll try again tonight?" he asks, grinning. You laugh. "If my spine forgives me." He nods solemnly. "Mine never does." And with that, he disappears into the courtyard, the day sweeping him away like the tide. You follow a few steps behind, squinting into the sun. The city is awake now, fully. People calling to one another from balconies. Horses clopping over stone. Someone in the distance tuning a lute very badly. And you carry the night with you. Not in your posture, but in your understanding. Of how people once viewed sleep. Not as passive, but as powerful. As a battleground. A mirror. A performance. You've crossed through it. And somehow, despite the discomfort, despite the awkwardness and the anatomy-defying pillows, despite the ghosts and the garlic and the terrifying dreams about flying pigs, you do it again. Because now, you're not just awake. You're a Renaissance sleeper. You've stepped outside. The city greets you not with fanfare, but with the soft chaos of another ordinary morning. A woman is yelling at a goose. This appears to be a daily occurrence. A boy runs past with a bundle of kindling, chased by a smaller boy who, for reasons known only to him, is waving a fish. Welcome to Renaissance Italy. Everything is both charming and slightly alarming. As you stroll through the street, your body still remembers the night. The stiffness in your knees, the odd ache behind your shoulder blades, the slight hunch you've inherited from hours of proud but unnatural posture. You're moving like someone who's either very wise or very confused. But that's the thing, everyone here is like this. You pass an elderly man adjusting his belt, muttering about a dream involving oranges and betrayal. A pair of women discuss their sleep as if it were last night's theater performance. I slipped down the bolster again, one says. I told you, the other replies. You need firmer stuffing. It hits you then. Sleep here isn't private. It's not tucked away in silence behind closed doors and blackout curtains. It's shared. Discussed. Deconstructed. Like politics or weather or who stole the best spot at market. That's because, in Renaissance Italy, sleep was social. This morning you're seeing it everywhere. A merchant rubbing his temples, complaining about heavy dreams. A midwife offering someone a small sachet of dried fennel to prevent another midnight upset. A baker yawning so dramatically he nearly falls into his bread. You walk past a small shrine set into a wall, candles still flickering, a Madonna with chipped paint, and an offering of figs and lavender. Sleep protection, perhaps. A little divine help for the body and spirit alike. Historians still debate whether these shared sleeping habits were born purely from necessity, limited space, close family quarters, or whether they reflected deeper cultural values. Some argue that in a society where death was ever present, closeness brought comfort. Others say that open sleep was about practicality, not preference. After all, if you're going to die from plague, you might as well do it next to someone you love. You turn into a narrow alley, the kind that makes modern fire codes weep. Clotheslines overhead sway gently in the breeze. A woman leans out a window, shaking out a blanket with practiced flicks. And then you see it, a sleeping corner. Not a full bedroom. Not even a proper room. Just a nook tucked under an archway. A mat of straw, a wedge of fabric-stuffed linen, a candle stub in a niche. Someone slept here. Upright, curled, half-covered. The setup is temporary, but intentional. It tells you something important. Even the poor slept sitting up. This wasn't a luxury quirk of the nobility. It was a pattern that trickled down. Of course, their pillows might be sacks of sawdust, and their sleep interrupted by the cold or the rats or the occasional clumsy donkey, but the posture remained. The same angle. The same beliefs. The same whisper of don't lie flat unless you absolutely have to. And when the poor did die in their sleep, the cause was often noted as lying too long. A catch-all term that mixed superstition with sorrow. You pause at a small fountain, scooping water with your hands. It's cold, and wonderfully real. The kind of shock that reminds you what century you're in, or at least, what century you've been pretending to survive in. Across the square, someone is drawing water. A boy leans against a barrel, yawning so hard it looks like a scream. His mother scolds him. Posturer, Marco. You'll trap your breath. You smile. The legacy of sleep still lives in these small moments. And now, a thought settles into your brain. What about the travelers? The merchants, artists, pilgrims, how did they manage to sleep upright on the road? Surely not every inn came with a deluxe wedge pillow and holy water spritz. You make your way toward a modest tavern at the edge of the square. It's early still, but you catch a glimpse of a back room where someone's untying bedrolls. Inside, you spot what looks like a sleeping bench, wooden, angled slightly, with a hook for a curtain and a basket beneath. One man yawns, stretches his back like a cat made of regret, and groans. Bunna not, someone teases. Let's say Bunna almost not, he replies, massaging his temples. You catch the rhythm of it again. These people didn't sleep because it was easy. They slept because they had to. And the way they slept was shaped by layers of belief, science, religion, and what Grandma swore by because she once saw a neighbor sleep flat and get the plague a week later. Even in travel, upright sleeping had its logic. No one wanted to be the guest who sprawled out like a corpse in a stranger's home. You sat up. You remained composed. You didn't take more space than you needed. Even your exhaustion had etiquette. That same etiquette extended to how you talked about sleep. Public groaning was fine. But boasting? No. You didn't brag about sleeping through the night like you were some kind of rebel. That was suspicious. Dangerous. Possibly French. You pass a weaver's stall now, the woman behind it humming as she threads wool. She's bright-eyed, suspiciously chipper for someone who, you assume, just spent 8 hours on a slanted cushion. You ask her how she slept. Like a mule under a saint's blessing, she says. You blink. That's good. She shrugs. Better than sleeping like a sinner in summer. You let it go. But her words stick with you. Sleep, for these people, wasn't a break from life, it was part of it. Interwoven with faith, fear, food, and the simple ache of existing in a world full of unpredictable things. So they made it predictable. They shaped their nights with order. Even if that order involved falling asleep at an angle that modern chiropractors would need therapy to discuss. You start to walk again, back toward the home that hosted you, back toward the bundle of blankets and worn bolsters that now feels oddly familiar. You're not quite ready for another upright night. But you're not afraid of it anymore. Because now you know it's not about comfort. It's about continuity. By the time you return, the sleeping chamber has been transformed. Gone are the slumped bodies and echoing snores. Now it's a different kind of busy. Bolsters are being fluffed and stacked. Sheets, still warm from night sweat and dreams, are being folded with crisp, reverent hands. The scent of rosemary lingers faintly in the air, chased by fresh smoke from the hearth where someone's already heating water. The bed is not a bed anymore. It's a stage, a bench, a makeshift throne. Your host is seated on it, tying his boots, his back remarkably straight for someone who's just spent the night in an open relationship with sciatica. He nods toward a young servant, who's carrying out the heavy wedge pillow like it's an artifact. You get the sense it kind of is. You help fold one of the thinner blankets. The wool is scratchy, heavy, holds the memory of sleep like breath trapped in a jar. As you smooth it, you realize something strange. You kind of miss the feeling already. There's a hush in the room. Not silence, but a morning sort of reverence. That blend of exhaustion and ritual that hangs over a household where everyone knows the work of rest has just been completed. Sleep, here, isn't invisible. It has weight. It has witnesses. It leaves a footprint. And yet, there's no ceremony. No big deal. No applause. You simply return the pillows to the cupboard, relight the oil lamp, and carry on. Because in Renaissance Italy, every night was a quiet negotiation with mortality. And every morning, a subtle declaration, not today, Grim Reaper. I slept upright. You help sweep the rushes on the floor. Fresh herbs, maybe lavender, definitely mint, are scattered on top. It's not just for the scent. Herbs ward off insects and bad smells. And according to most grandmothers from Florence to Naples, evil that rides in on your shadow. Historians still argue whether this obsessive herbalism was about actual pest control or spiritual hygiene. Probably both. After all, if a sprig of thyme under your mattress kept away fleas and demons, why not double down? You glance over and spot an older woman holding a small vial of something cloudy. She dabs it behind her ears and mutters a short phrase. It smells like vinegar and basil. Sleep protection? Or morning fortification? Who knows? It's all one long spell, really. Then comes the washing. A copper basin is brought in, along with a pitcher. Hands are scrubbed, faces rinsed. Teeth brushed with ash or salt or, if someone's really fancy, powdered coral. A young boy complains that his breath still smells like stew. His mother tells him that's just what honesty smells like. Someone hands you a small cloth soaked in rosewater. You dab it across your forehead, and instantly feel more like a person and less like a confused statue that sat through a philosophy lecture while unconscious. As everyone finishes, the room slowly empties. Not abruptly, just naturally. As if the act of sleep has finished its run, the curtain has dropped, and the actors are already moving on to their next roles. You're left alone, just briefly, in the space where last night's upright dreaming unfolded. And for a moment, you see it. Not just the bed. Not just the blankets or bolsters or half-spilled candle wax. You see the structure. The invisible scaffolding that made it all work. The beliefs. The fears. The unspoken rules passed from grandmother to midwife to sleeping child. The generations who insisted that lying flat was dangerous, undignified, and just plain tacky. The people who woke in the night to sip soup, say a prayer, tell a joke, and then drift back into a second sleep while propped against something lovingly designed to prevent both death and bad posture. You sit back down for a moment. Just to feel it again. It's strange. The upright angle no longer feels hostile. It's awkward, sure. But now it's familiar. Like an old habit you didn't know you could learn in a single night. You try to imagine doing this for a lifetime. Every night. Every season. Through winters with damp walls and summers full of mosquitoes that think you're a buffet. Through plagues and weddings and nights when the soup was too salty and the dreams were too real. You understand now why people developed entire belief systems around sleep. When your body has to work this hard just to rest, everything else feels connected. The shape of your sleep affects the shape of your spirit. And if you wake up twisted the wrong way, maybe your whole day gets tilted with it. A servant peeks in and hands you a cup of barley tea. You take it gratefully. It tastes like hot cereal, but you're too tired to complain. She points to the bolster you used. First time? You nod. She laughs. You'll dream better next time. You hope so. You finish your tea and look around the room one last time before stepping back into the day. The sun is higher now. Light floods through the open shutters. You spot a lizard sunning itself on the edge of the window, blissfully unaware of the deeply complicated sleep posture humans are currently wrestling with. You envy it. Outside, the city moves with purpose. Wheels turn. Voices rise. Banners sway above narrow streets. The chaos of the living world wraps itself around you again. But something's changed. You're moving differently now. Not faster. Not lighter. But with a kind of quiet awareness. Because now you carry the shape of the night inside you. And it's slightly bent. You walk with a kind of bend now. Not in your spine, though, let's be honest, there's a bit of that too, but in your understanding. Something subtle has shifted. The idea of sleep no longer feels soft and empty. It feels structured, conscious, intentional. Like a ritual you perform with your body rather than to it. And that realization follows you through the city like a shadow. Florence, Venice, Siena, they don't wake like modern cities. They unfurl. Slowly. Cautiously. There are no screeching alarms or espresso machines growling like robots. There's the creak of carts, the slap of sandals on stone, the murmur of Ave Marias whispered at shrine corners. Sleep still clings to the edges of the city, even in the daylight. You find yourself noticing things differently. A man sleeping on a church step, upright, arms folded, his head tilted like a painting of Saint Jerome. Is he homeless? Praying? Resting between shifts? In this world, the answer might be yes to all. Further along, two women gossip at a market stall. One of them wears a linen scarf wrapped around her neck, not fashion, but function. Last night's sleep left her throat stiff. She swears it's because the bolsters were out of alignment with the window's moonlight. Her friend nods sagely and suggests sleeping with a slice of lemon under the tongue next time. You keep walking. In a quiet cloister courtyard, you find a monk sketching herbs into a journal. He glances up, notices your slightly crooked gait, and smiles. Cipolla, he offers. Onion. You raise an eyebrow. For the back, he explains, tapping his own lower spine. Slice it, warm it, wear it while you sleep. Flat or seated. You nod slowly. He adds, flat is for corpses, remember. And you do remember. Because everyone keeps saying it. Here in Renaissance Italy, the line between life and death is more than breath, it's posture. Upright means alive. Horizontal means expired, exorcised, or just dangerously confident in your lung strength. Historians still argue whether the sleeping upright trend was ever medically effective or simply a highly persuasive superstition passed down by people who didn't have chiropractors but did have lots of opinions. You duck into a small apothecary. Shelves brim with jars, dried poppies, mint, crushed pearl, something that looks suspiciously like lizard tail. You scan the labels. Most are dedicated to sleep. Or more accurately, to managing its dangers. Dream salves. Phlegm balancers. Antidemon incense. You spot one tiny bottle labeled simply, 4-night knees. The apothecary, a wiry man with eyebrows that defy gravity, greets you without question. He gestures to the low counter, where a bound ledger sits open to a list of recorded dreams. Last night's entries. Customers leave notes sometimes, dreams they don't understand, images they fear. The apothecary interprets them when he can. You flip through a few. A dog with 3 tongues warned me about bread. I flew over my own funeral while riding a fish. My neighbor grew feathers. I was pleased. Each one is time-stamped. Each one upright, by default. You ask him why. He shrugs. You think better when your organs aren't smushed. Can't argue with that. Back outside, you wander down toward the river. Water sparkles beneath the morning sun, boats bob gently, and fishermen trade theories on why their catch was smaller today. One swears he dreamt of nets breaking. The others nod like this is both interesting and completely actionable. You settle on a low stone wall, watching them. Your thoughts drift back to the bed, the bolsters, the impossible stillness of the night. You remember the lull between first and second sleep. The way the fire crackled like an old man clearing his throat. The smell of garlic and wool. The sensation of your own body sitting inside the darkness like a nervous pilgrim. You wonder how many people slept like that, across how many years. 1,000? 1,000,000? How many whispered prayers were murmured in those in-between hours? How many dreams were taken seriously, recorded, dissected, turned into plans or poems or panicked mid-morning letters? And how many of those dreams were shaped, literally, by the angle of the spine? Science hasn't offered many concrete answers. But culture? Oh, it gave plenty. Painters depicted saints sleeping upright in chairs, heads tipped back gently, eyes closed as if waiting for a divine whisper. Writers warned against the sin of sprawling. Sleep with discipline, one 16th century priest declared, for Satan finds the soul lazier when the body lies limp. You shake your head, smile slightly. Even now, centuries later, some of that logic clings to us. Sit up straight. Don't slouch. Good posture equals good morals. You think about how you sleep at home, splayed out like a starfish on a memory foam mattress, drooling onto a pillow that cost more than most Renaissance apprentices made in a month. And yet, you wake up tired, crooked, dazed. Last night, you sat upright. And despite the stiffness, the strangeness, the sheer logistical effort, it felt different. Purposeful. You watch a boy by the river stacking crates. His movements are methodical, practiced. Like he's reenacting a ritual passed from someone older, someone bent by habit and belief. It mirrors the same logic that shaped the sleep of an entire civilization. This world doesn't waste time questioning its traditions. It simply performs them. And maybe, in doing so, gives its people a kind of psychological shelter modern life often forgets to build. You stretch your legs. Your knees crack. Your back agrees to disagree with your hips. You stand slowly. No rush. The day is still unfolding. And somewhere, maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, you know you'll return to that posture. That deliberate, upright leaning. That halfway space between rest and reverence. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's history. The bells ring again. This time, you hear them not as background ambience, but as punctuation marking the slow rhythm of a life where every act, even sleep, has its designated place. The tone is sharper now, midday approaching, and the city is bustling in full daylight. Stalls shout, shoes slap stone, and pigeons conduct silent meetings with full agenda items. But you're still moving slowly, deliberately, as if your body has internalized the night. Or maybe as if it's bracing for the next one. You duck into a shaded portico. It's cool there, lined with worn stone benches and one elderly man using a walking stick carved into the shape of a swan. He nods to you without moving his eyes from the sun's angle. You walk like someone who sat upright all night, he says, not unkindly. You nod. I used to do it too, he adds. Then I got old. Now I just nap standing up. You both chuckle, his raspy, yours mildly haunted. And the conversation shifts, naturally, to sleep. Here, everyone has a theory, a trick, a caution. Sleeping upright isn't a mystery, it's a practice. And every person has something to say about how you're doing it wrong. Pillows too soft. You'll dream of drowning. Too many blankets. You'll sweat out your courage. Not enough basil near your window. Might as well invite a ghost in for dinner. You listen patiently. Because you've learned, sleep here is everyone's business. The elderly man continues. When I was a boy, we had a sleep priest. You blink. A what? He nods. Not officially. But he had rules. Herbs, oils, the right angle. Said if you slept slanted by more than 15 degrees, the devil could land on your chest. Did it work? Never met the devil, he shrugs. Though I did once dream I was married to a goat. Noted. You thank him and continue on. Passing through a quieter street now, you hear a lull. The city breathes in. Shops close for rest. Not the hustle rest of modern times. The real kind. Midday repose. It's not exactly napping time, but it's a quiet, sacred pause where the body and mind are gently encouraged to take a break. A tailor rests his head back against the wall, eyes closed, lips murmuring numbers, measurements, or possibly sheep. A woman in a nearby doorway adjusts her scarf and slides into a corner chair, her neck carefully angled against a woven headrest. It's barely past noon, and already, the sitting up has begun again. You realize, with a small jolt, that this posture isn't just for night. It spills into every part of the day. Need to relax. Sit, lean, breathe, but don't recline too much. You never know what that signals. Grief, upright. Joy, upright, but with better cushions. Prayer, always upright, even if your knees don't agree. You pass a school, peeking through an open window. Children are hunched over tiny desks, some dozing upright, their little heads bobbing slightly. A teacher walks among them, tapping rhythmically on a table with a wooden stick, not to wake them, but to keep the room gently tethered to consciousness. The afternoon wears on. You're tired now. Not just from the sleep, but from thinking about sleep. From having learned that something you once took for granted, stretch out, close eyes, wake up with blanket wrapped around your head like a cinnamon roll, could have been shaped so differently. So restrictively. And still, work. Historians still debate whether this lifestyle truly improved health. Was upright sleep really better for the lungs? Did it reduce nighttime deaths? Or did people simply believe hard enough that it worked? And maybe that's the secret. Belief does something. It builds meaning into otherwise uncomfortable acts. When sleep is hard to come by, or risky, or structurally weird, belief fills in the gaps. You sit upright not because it's cozy, but because it matters. You spot a vendor selling little wooden headrests shaped like wedgies. He has 5 types. Some are carved with vines. Others are painted with saints. One is simply labeled for snorers. You pick it up. It's absurdly solid. Used it myself for years, the vendor says. Back when I had dreams. You tilt your head. Oh, I still sleep, he explains, but I don't dream anymore. Just rest. You ask him why. Maybe I've seen too much. Or maybe, he smiles, I finally got the angle right. You buy the wedge. Not because you need it, but because it feels like a souvenir from a strange spiritual geometry lesson. Back near the church, you watch people gathering again. Evening vespers approaching. Another round of prayers, another batch of wax offerings, another collective plea for safety in the hours ahead. Because night is coming. And night is serious business. You're struck again by how much effort goes into something we now automate with mattresses, apps, and blackout curtains. These people prepare for sleep like it's a pilgrimage. They talk about it like a moral test. They treat each night like a trial to be passed upright, in body and in spirit. You begin to imagine your own return to sleep tonight. Will it feel different now? Now that you know it's not just about posture, but position? That every inch of lean is a quiet declaration that you want to wake up again? That you're trying to outwit bad air, lurking spirits, and the silent betrayal of your own lungs? You find yourself planning your pillow stack already. The thought is, weirdly comforting. You walk home slowly. The streets begin to soften. People begin their pre-sleep routines again. Bread is soaked. Fire is stoked. Words become whispers. And everywhere, people sit down. Upright. Waiting for night. The light fades. Not abruptly. Renaissance Italy doesn't do anything abruptly unless someone drops a wine jug, but gradually, gently. Like a stagehand dimming lanterns one wick at a time. Golds turn to ambers, ambers to shadows, and suddenly the whole city is dipped in a soft, velvet hush. Dinner has come and gone, simple food, warm and earthy. You soaked bread in broth, again. It's still not soup exactly, but your stomach doesn't argue. People around you ate with the same calm they sleep with. Slowly. Gratefully. Upright. Now, as the sky bruises purple and stars blink awake, you find yourself settling into the familiar sleeping space. The same room. The same walls. But it feels different tonight. You are no longer a guest. You're a participant. Your host is already layering bolsters. One for his wife. One for himself. One for their eldest daughter, who has perfected the art of snoring softly while remaining perfectly vertical, like a noble cypress. You find your corner again, same blanket, same stiff pillow, and begin the subtle dance of arranging your body into the geometry of survival. You angle your back. You wedge the bolster. You cross your hands like you've seen everyone else do. And you breathe. And in that breath is something deeper than sleep. It's acceptance. You're doing this not because it's practical, but because it's part of the fabric. You're folded into the same cloth as everyone else. Not just historically, but emotionally. The fear of lying flat. The reverence for posture. The belief, however irrational, that upright sleep keeps the soul moored to the body. You remember what the priest said yesterday: if you rise in the night, give thanks before you close your eyes again. And so you do. It's a strange peace that settles over you. Yes, your lower back still feels like it's negotiating a truce with the rest of your skeleton. But your mind is strangely light. The room is quiet, only the gentle clink of cooling pottery and the occasional soft exhale. The candles flicker lower. The fire crumbles into embers. And soon, you drift. Not into unconsciousness, exactly. Into something quieter. Softer. Sleep here isn't a door that slams shut. It's a path that slopes downward. You walk it slowly. Carefully. Upright. In the dark, you hear someone murmur. A prayer, maybe. Or a dream leaking out. Historians still debate whether people in the Renaissance really believed upright sleep prevented death, or whether it simply helped them feel less helpless in a world where life ended so easily. The truth is probably both. Belief doesn't always need proof, it just needs comfort. And this posture, this practice, this nighttime ritual of balance and breath, it comforts. Even when it aches. Even when you don't fully understand it. You shift slightly, feeling the bolster resist and support you at once. Your neck tilts just so. Your arms rest on your lap, fingers relaxed. You listen to the breaths around you, dozens of soft, shallow rhythms stacked like harmonies in a sleeping choir. You're part of something ancient now. Not just history, but the experience of being human in a time when fear and faith shaped even the smallest acts. When sleep wasn't downtime, it was a trial. A bridge to be crossed with caution. A vulnerability that had to be dressed up in ritual and rigidity. And tomorrow, when the light slips back in through the shutter slats, you'll wake again. Not well rested. Not exactly comfortable. But somehow restored. You'll stretch. You'll ache. You'll sip lukewarm barley tea and thank your vertebrae for their cooperation. You'll laugh about the dream where you married a goat or danced with angels or flew through the roof of the cathedral wearing only your undertunic. And you'll sit upright again tomorrow night. Not because it makes sense, but because it connects you to something. A line of upright sleepers stretching back through time, each one curled around their own little fears and herbs and lumpy pillows. Each one whispering goodnight to the world with their heads held high. Literally. So tonight, as your breath slows, as the hush thickens, as the last candle winks out, you sleep. Sitting up. Like they did. Like you do now. And now, just breathe. You've made it through the strange, lumpy, wedge pillow world of Renaissance sleep. Through fear and firelight, through fig-scented prayers and spine-defying angles. Through ghost stories and garlic, saints and sleep priests, soup and second slumbers. Let that world fade, gently now. Let the stone walls crumble softly behind your eyes. Let the fire's last glow flicker away into cool ash. You don't need to sit upright tonight. Or maybe you do. But now, you know why. You understand the weight behind the posture. The quiet belief that survival is an art, and even something as ordinary as sleep can be performed with meaning. So as you settle into your own bed, whether it's memory foam, straw-stuffed, or just a borrowed couch, remember the upright sleepers. Remember how they shaped the dark hours with care, with caution, with something that looked a lot like hope. Let your body go soft now. Uncurl the tension behind your knees. Drop your shoulders. Unclench that jaw. Let the room dim in your mind. Let the noise fade. Nothing is chasing you. Nothing is expected of you. For now, you are allowed to rest. Not perform. Not brace. Just rest. Maybe even dream of ancient cities. Of candlelight and murmured Latin. Of bolsters and barley tea and the collective sigh of a world trying, every night, to survive until morning. You've made it to the end of the journey. So close your eyes. And sleep well.